inaugural social entrepreneur in residence for Duke University and visiting professor for the practice of public policy at the Stanford School of Public Policy at Duke. She was a visiting scholar and professional lecturer at the Paul H. Nitze School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins University and continues to serve as an adjunct on the faculty. Maya holds an AB from Bryn Mawr College and an MPP from the Stanford School of Public Policy at Duke University. She's a board member of the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics Foundation, a former trustee and graduate of NCSM. Maya is also a member of the North Carolina STEM Hall of Fame. So I would like to thank Maya for giving us the time to talk with her about her past and what she has for the future as well. So thank you so much for joining us.
Sure, absolutely.
Yep. So I think we can just get started right in with the questions. So obviously a big thing that you hold central to your heart is your origins. You're from North Carolina. So can you talk about where you're from and how you got involved in STEM?
Yeah, so I'm the daughter of Indian immigrants, and I grew up in Greenville, North Carolina, and I consider Greenville to be home. I grew up there from the age of 3 till I was 16 years old, and my dad was on the faculty at East Carolina University and found the love of STEM through, my parents, of course. I watched Nova as a kid and read Science News at the Shepherd Memorial Library. But I also was very fortunate to work in a botany lab when I was in 7th grade and 8th grade at East Carolina University. And I started studying the growth of duckweeds, which can be thought of as a future source of food because of its high protein concentration. And that got me hooked on science fairs and science. And then I went to the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics, and I was actually in the 4th class. So I'm a lot older than you guys, but that's kind of paved my way.
Yeah, that's great. So moving on, you also founded an organization right out of college. So can you tell us about that experience as well?
Sure. So, I was really on a very straight and narrow path of becoming a doctor or a scientist. The daughter of Indian immigrants was like, there's very narrow paths, but I, after Bryn Mawr College, I majored in neuroscience, but was on my way to get an MD PhD, frankly. But I got a fellowship, a Rotary International Graduate Fellowship that gave me the opportunity to travel from Thailand to Pakistan for a year. And I had wonderful professors who said, Maya, if you really want to understand the world and understand their aspirations, get a backpack and start traveling for a year. And I did that. And it was in India, where my parents are from, that I say I had my moment of obligation. I was in a small town. It's actually a pretty big town of Bhubaneswar in the northeastern part of India. And I don't know if any of you've been to India, but it's a very chaotic place on the train stations. And among this chaos, I saw 50 kids sitting in a circle learning how to read and write. And there was a teacher in the middle teaching these kids with flashcards. And I asked them, well, what's going on here? And she said, well, these children live on and around the train platform. They work, they play, they beg, they sleep here, but they don't go to school. And there's a social entrepreneur who said, instead of getting these kids to school, I'm going to bring the school to the train platforms. And so at the age of 22, I thought, how come I don't see more train platform schools all over India? And 2, how can I help? Well, fast forward, it was really about how do you invest small amounts of capital into really innovative grassroots organizations serving the most vulnerable children and youth? And how do you make them sustainable and scalable? So I went back and I put off my MD PhD and I got my master's in public policy at Duke. And I founded that organization when I was 24 years old and built that into a global institution of really investing in innovative organizations throughout the world. And I led that for 17 years before making a switch back to science, frankly. But, what's interesting about a STEM background and served me well, and I'm going to tell everyone this, it serves everyone well, that a STEM background actually gives you a lot of very important skills. And one of I'm not even sure it's a skill, but one of those things is about learning about failure. You guys are in a hackathon. You guys are going to try, iterate, try again, iterate. And if it doesn't work, you're going to work on it again. You know, something not working is part of the STEM deal, right? It's part of the deal you're making with technology, with science, with engineering. That is an incredible learning that I took to the Global Fund for Children, because there were a lot of things that didn't work, and we iterated, right? We said, okay, why didn't this work? Why didn't this grassroots organization all the way in Vietnam or in Guatemala didn't work? What did we learn from it? And what better programs can there be to serve the most vulnerable children and youth? So, I took a very big left turn in terms of founding the Global Fund for Children, but using technology, using the skills of the process of thinking through problems and problem solving, and also the idea that if something didn't work, you don't run away from it. You actually say, that gives me another answer to the way I might need to go.
Yeah, that's so great to hear. Going off of you're talking about failures and how you had to overcome them, right, in your development of this organization. So could you talk about like an example of like a failure you had when developing this organization and sort of like steps you took to overcome it?
Sure. So, I mean, it's a bit more complicated to talk about a failure, but I'll give one example. There were organizations that we actually, we gave small amounts of money to these organizations, right? 5,000, 10,000 micro grants. And once these organizations ended up growing, one of the things we did not do at the very beginning was really talk about, how do you grow well, right? How do you scale in a way that's sustainable, right? And sometimes scaling, you're in the technology world, right? You guys are about scale. Like once you create that technology or that app or whatever you're creating, you could scale it, right? It can just, it multiplies on each other. What we learned was that we weren't providing enough good tools to understand the ups and downs of scalability. And where could you see those pitfalls, and how do you figure that out? And so we created a toolkit that allowed us to give more of that information. So I hope that makes sense. But scalability, I'm sure in the tech world, that's all it is, right? It's about, you create something, but then it can be replicated very easily.
Yep, you made a really valid point, across both the organizations and in the tech world. So thank you for that. So moving on.
One thing I will say,
yeah,
is that technologists and engineers in particular like controlled variability, right? The variability that's controlled. What is really hard to figure out is the uncontrolled variability. And that's where people at institutions become very messy, frankly. They're just, because it's uncontrolled, right? You might have a lot of variability, but they're uncontrolled. And you can't think of every single one of those variables in an innovation that you're creating, right? But controlled variability, you can, right? And that's why the software industry or your apps or even your medicines or vaccines all take into account controlled variability. But where you get messed up is when there's uncontrolled variability that you didn't see.
Yeah, of course. So I think this brings us, you obviously established that, you had that experience in creating the organization right out of college, right? So moving on to your current organization, can you tell us about the work that you do today for the Society for Science?
Yeah, so after the Global Fund for Children, I went into academia, I came to Duke and Johns Hopkins, and I started teaching. But then I got this wonderful call and said, Maya, would you like to run the Society for Science and become publisher of Science News? And the Society for Science, was founded by E.W. Scripps and Bill Ritter, William Ritter, in 1921. So we're 100 years old this year. And what's really interesting was the reason they created the organization was because they were reading about things that weren't true in the newspaper. They were reading about three-legged Martians. And they were like, we have to create a new group of science journalists that report on evidence-based, fact-based science. And so that is the way we got started, through Science News, which I hope many of you read. We're at sciencenews.org. But then in 1942, they became very concerned about talent. How do we get the next generation of talent to become scientists or engineers in this country and around the world? So we founded the Science Talent Search, which was then called the Westinghouse Science Talent Search for 50 years. And I'm a Westinghouse kid. It was then Intel Science Talent Search, and now Regeneron Science Talent Search. And I'm sure many of you are all familiar of STS. And then in 1950, we created the International Science and Engineering Fair, the largest pre-collegiate STEM competition in the world. And I believe, Kushik, you actually competed in, it was an Intel ISEF or Regeneron ISEF?
It was Intel back then. I was in the 2017 and 2018 years. So,
okay, so you were in the Intel classes.
Yep.
And that's the largest pre-collegiate STEM competition in the world. So if you think about a place of 2,000 kids coming from 80 countries across 21 judging categories, I'm sure Kushik could say, I found my people. It's a pretty extraordinary place. It's like a rock concert, right? It's pretty fun. And then we have our middle school STEM competition as well, called Broadcom Masters. The other piece to our work is making sure that every young person in this country can become a scientist or engineer or technologist if that's what they want to be when they grow up. To do that, we had to create a suite of outreach and equity programs. So we have Science News in high schools, which helps young people become literate, scientifically literate. We have a mentorship program. We work with teachers, and we also provide grants to really innovative STEM organizations and STEM teachers across the country. And we're reaching millions of students every year. But each and every one of you have been probably touched by our work in some way or fashion, either through your teacher or through Science News or through our competitions or through our science fairs. We founded science fairs, many, in 1950 before, and I'm sure many of you competed in your local science fairs or our affiliated science fairs.
Yeah, I mean, I can really attest to science fairs being a big part of, my past, and definitely still a lot of people I keep in touch today are because of that. So thank you for, I guess, organizing science fairs. I think we can move on to talking sort of into inspiration that you can offer to college students. So HackNC is probably one of the biggest student-run hackathons in the Southeastern United States. So do you have any words of inspiration or advice to college students participating today?
Yeah, so keep at it. That's one thing, but I'm going to give you one piece of advice. Stay away from people who suck the passion out of you. If you have a big, hairy, audacious idea that you want to create through technology, through a program you're building, then do it. And then there are going to be some naysayers out there saying, that's just completely nuts. Like, you can never do that. Stay away from those people. Just stay away from them because they suck the passion out of you. You should be around people who challenge you, who may say, that coding, you may want to think about it in a different way, right? But stay away from the naysayers, because naysayers don't solve the world's most intractable problems. It's the people who believe in these big, hairy, audacious ideas that do. And I would say, just keep doing it. I was told many times, I was told by two professors even, that my idea of founding the Global Fund for Children would never work. One, because of my age. Two, because it was global. Three is because of the business methodology, right? And I've heard this even with our work today. Why should we support STEM students to do research? Why is that important, right? Well, research is the place where you learn project-based learning. You don't read science, you do science, right? You don't read about technology, you do it, right? You don't read, you can read about it, but the way you really do STEM is by doing it.
And that's great. So I think something else that I want to, ask in addition to that is, how can college students like ourselves sort of get involved within like the research work and also just work at SSP as well?
Yeah, so, the Society for Science has a very innovative internship program. So you should just look us up online for jobs and internships and apply. But, what's the first part of the question again?
Sort of how college students who are sort of new to the research field, right,
Right.
they can get involved.
So look, if you're new to the research field and want to do it, go, and you're interested, let's just say in climate change, right? And you're interested in technology and climate change, go look at the professors who may be doing research around some of the areas you're interested in at UNC Chapel Hill or Duke or wherever you guys are studying, frankly, because there will be professors who want to take on undergraduate research assistants. And usually they have some money attached to that too. And you won't be just washing beakers or just inputting data. They're actually going to make you do real stuff, right? And advocate for yourself. That's the biggest thing I would say is advocate, and don't give up if a professor says no. Go to the next one, go to the next one, right? Someone will eventually say yes. And really think about the summer being a good time to do that too. But go work for a computer science professor who may be working on using computer science and climate change, or computer science and COVID-19, right? Where those intersectionalities is really interesting to me, because the thing that you guys need to grow up to become are ruthless interdisciplinarians, right? And you're not going to be in your narrow fields anymore. And the other piece, I mean, it's just amazing to see undergraduate majors these days. It's really quite fascinating. It used to be just in these narrow, like you're a biology major, you're a physics major, you're this. Now it's like biology with a major in women's studies, with a minor in philosophy, or you see physics and mathematics and religion, or you see computer science and neuroscience and something else, right? It's just a mixture that I think is really key.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. Good to hear that, even people who aren't as involved in research can, you can always get involved in research whenever you like.
Yeah.
So the next question that we have is, what's the best advice that you've received, throughout your working career?
Well, one, I already said, stay away from the people who suck the passion out of you, right? And just, for me, I would say the best advice I've ever gotten is to stick with something, right? Like, don't give up. And don't be afraid to seek for help. Really smart folks like you guys are not good at seeking help. Seek help, seek support, seek a mentor, frankly. And people are willing and able and ready to provide that support. So that's probably the best advice I've gotten.
Yeah, I think that's something that I struggle in as well. And I think I should probably, start reaching out to more people whenever I face problems. So that's good to hear. So I guess, what are you excited about, or what gets you the most excited about what the future holds?
All of you. It's like almost passing the torch a little bit of the next generation of leaders. I'm really inspired by, what's going on in Glasgow with the young people who've been, being activists and protesting about climate change. But you guys using your skills to solve the world's most intractable problems, you have some really extraordinary tools in front of you. The other thing I would say is use those tools for the betterment of society. Okay. Technology can be abused, and hackers have a great reputation, and they can also have not a great reputation of going after data and privacy issues. Really think about what your role is in what you play as a technologist. I think that's really key.
So on the contrary, right? So when you think about the future, what keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night? Climate change, COVID-19, or pandemics in general, because this is not going to be our last one. I think, they will get closer and closer. If we don't figure out the way we manage that, it's going to be very difficult, right? I'm also just very worried about young men in this world. I believe that there's a crisis going on with young men and boys, and we need to do more around that. Whoops. Can you see me? Sorry, something
Yeah,
happened there.
yeah, I think you're good now.
Apologies.
Yeah, so you're talking about uh, sort of the problems that you think are going to be pretty big in the future. So
Yeah, I think climate change, I think pandemics. I'm also very concerned about the plight of boys and young men in the world. High incarceration rates of um, of young people, especially young Black men. The drug wars. I mean, all of this, idle youth in Africa and India, violence against girls. I'm very concerned about. We need to do more for boys globally. We've been doing a lot to invest in girls and more power, and we should continue, but we need to do more for boys and young men. I think there's a crisis boiling around that. But I would say, but I'm also very hopeful about the world we're living in.
yeah, so you obviously mentioned like those three problems, right? So as people within the STEM field, what can we do to better alleviate those problems? What steps can we take? Obviously as someone within the research field, I hope you probably have some sort of knowledge behind each of these backgrounds, right? Or each of these topics. So what are some steps or potential next steps that we can take as like the next generation in the STEM field to help alleviate
Keep
those problems?
reading, do research, figure out how in an interdisciplinary fashion you can, I never ask people, what do you want to be when you grow up? I always say, what problem do you want to solve when you grow up? So I really ask you to think about that. This doesn't have to do with me and climate change or pandemics. It's really about you. What problem do you want to solve when you grow up?
Oh, that sounds great. So in the
Do we have any
last
questions
15
from the
minutes, yeah,
folks?
any questions from the audience? You can type in the chat or just speak up.
No questions. Okay, it's a shy group.
I guess something that I would like to ask is, I guess, what's next for the Society for Science? What are in the plans?
We really
Any,
hope to create a global climate change competition for college students.
yeah, that would be great for sure.
Yeah.
Anything else that's in the works for Society for Science?
We actually may put out a magazine for younger kids also. Science needs to start early. So we're looking at possibly starting a new magazine for the middle school market. But yeah, I mean, we just have to keep doing what we're doing it and do it well. That's the way I see it. But these are two new things that are coming down the pike.
I guess one other question that I have is, obviously there are a lot of trends within the STEM industry, right? So are there any recent developments that you've seen, or I guess I would like to get more of your opinion about sort of how we're able to transition from what exists in research and taking that towards the public sector in terms of business. Do you have any opinions on that?
Yeah, I think the translational part of research and taking that to industry is a very big deal right now. I will say we see many of our ISEF alums from the competitions now starting companies. And it's really a spinoff from the work that they've been doing in college or graduate school, frankly. Um, uh, One great example is Dr. Feng Zhang. He's one of the co-founders of CRISPR-Cas9. And he's done that research in his lab, but now has spun off several companies, right? And we see that constantly. Another one from the International Science and Engineering Fair is Jesse Levinson, who founded something called Zook, ZOOX, around driverless cars, and just got acquired by Amazon. So there's just a lot going on in terms of the research you're doing. And they all started within college or graduate school, but spun out, frankly. And there's a lot of capital, frankly, to take those projects to market, to take those innovations to market.
Yep.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, because it's been such a great treat to talk to you today. And I hope others will, I know this has been recorded, so I hope others will see the recording at their leisure. But I hope everyone's been listening in. I can't see anyone's faces, so, but if anyone has questions, Kaushik, you know where to find me.
Yep, for sure. And if there are any more questions, put them in the chat. But seeing that there are none, I think we can wrap this up a little early. Thank you once again, Maya, for taking the time to talk with us. We definitely, enjoyed listening to your advice, what you think is going to be there in the future, and just your overall experiences. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Absolutely. And I would also just say the sponsors who I see sponsoring are fabulous, and they have fabulous internship programs like Infosys and John Deere and others. And you're in the Research Triangle Park if you're at UNC, but just it is, you guys are extraordinary, but use technology for good. That's what I would say. Use it for good. And I'm seeing a lot of thank yous here. So you are very, very welcome. I appreciate that very much. Be well, take good care, and stay safe.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone.